Hello and welcome to the 6 Plus show, a podcast for your wargaming and 40k needs. Hobby talk, tactics, tournament reports, lore and much more. We have it all. Please welcome your host for the evening, Tom.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen and Suneshi demons to that 6 Plus show. I am Tom and I am on hosting duty tonight. And I am joined, as always, by my dear leader, Chris. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm very well, thank you. Can't complain.
Chris, what's new in your life?
What's new in my life? I have been painting some Dire Avengers.
That's exciting. How many Dire Avengers are you trying to paint?
30.
30. It's all in on 30. That's amazing.
You gotta have 30. No, I've painted one, and I'm painting them 10 at a time. So I've got the base colours on another 9 at the moment.
I always found them quite nice to paint, Dire Avengers.
Yeah, they're not.
I quite like them. I like the little plumes. The little plumes are nice on the helmets.
Pretty easy. On my test one, I decided to do a bit of cheeky little blending just to give some 3D effect.
Yeah.
Which obviously I'm now regretting for the other 29. Hopefully it goes okay. But then once I've got that done, I've got a little bit of my
a good chunk of the list. Yeah,
30 Dire Avengers is decent points.
Chris, and before we get into it, I understand you have a shout out for one of our listeners.
I do. For those who listen to the podcast, you'll remember was it 3 episodes ago when we recapped Nottingham, and I guess the theme of the early part was how relatable we were and how bang average we were as a team. And I received a message from dear Chris. So Chris was the guy who spoke to me first of all with his tyrannies. And I felt so bad because Chris sent me a message saying, "Oh, I really hope I didn't cause you any offence. It's not what I meant. I really like the podcast." I have spoken to him, but just for everyone, it's very hard to offend me. Okay, there was no offence taken.
I've tried. I've really tried.
People try regularly. It's very hard to offend me.
Two things about Chris is he's very good at seeming offended. That's a big part of who he is, and he's literally impossible to actually hurt. We've all tried. It just bounces straight off him. Nothing slows him down, so he's absolutely fine. Don't you worry. We were just mucking around with it. And we like being relatable, and we're also, we achieve what we achieve, and that is just fine. We are more than happy with that. But we did think it was funny when someone was worried that we'd actually taken it to heart, and we're gonna.
I look forward to seeing you at the ITT, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be in the mid-table somewhere, won't we?
On that 2-3-3-2 relatable, bang average kind of
flying our relatable trade, absolutely. But I'm not just joined by Chris tonight. I also have a very special guest and a very long-time friend of mine. He's waving now. It is Jon Scrivo Scrivens. How are you doing, John?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. I've had a day off.
Yes, you're resting, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about. You're having a little bit of well-earned time off because we have just got back from your second Warzone Faustus event.
Yes.
And obviously, Warzone Faustus we'll talk about in a minute. It's a narrative series of events that John has been running in Nottingham at the T-Sports arena of the Honest Wargamer, which John's obviously a big part. We'll get John to tell you a little bit about himself and his background in a moment. But today we want to talk about that. We want to talk about how narrative events, the sort of why you might want to try one, and John's own experience of sort of designing and setting one of those up. And we'll do some sort of listener questions, and John's going to chip in and help us out with some listener mail towards the end. But before we get into this narrative stuff and learn a little bit more about John, we've got some housekeeping to do. We're big self-promoters now. We've learned how to self-promote over Christmas, as you're all aware. And part of that is what we're going to call the Pluse Roundup, which we're going to try and do at the beginning of the show, just to let you know what sorts of content we're working on, what sorts of things we've got coming out. So quickly and briefly, Chris is going to launch into the Pluse Roundup. Let's have it.
Oh, that's nice. Specialism, quick and brief. So
we're both really good at it.
So basically, obviously, in recent times we've been putting a lot of just podcasts out, and we want to be putting out a bit more than that. So we've kind of reformed our multiple WhatsApp groups, and we've got a bit more of a focus and a few more people on board who are going to be producing content. So each week or each podcast episode, we'll just let you know what we've produced. And most recently, so the other day we had a bite-sized battle report between Tom and Davey. So that's NIDS versus GSE. So these are like 15, 20-minute battle reports, just focusing on the key takeaways of each turn. And then Davey is going all out and doing his own very special Tyrannid show called Bug Watch. And what he's going to do is he's going to take look at the lists that did well for Tyranids at the weekend, and then what lists he's looking forward to seeing how they get on and he thinks are good for the following weekend. And apparently he's going to do that every week. So if you're a Tyrannid fan, then that is the show for you. I've just put out, literally, just click the button to put out the first episode. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. So those are kind of the most recent things. Next week, we're going to have our very first Sigma episode featuring us three and two others. I'm not going to reveal too much, but it's going to be a monthly episodic content. So if you're interested in Sigma, you should really enjoy that. And then we've got another battle report to release, which I'm just editing at the moment, between Tom and myself, which is Custodes versus Drukari, and it goes down to literally the last
fantastic game. It was a ludicrous game. So both the bat reps are good fun. Davey and I got very silly with the bat rep, and it was the Melee GSC list which you guys on the community page voted for. So if you want to see some aberrants and some pure strains doing their thing, that's the bat rep for you.
And Kevin. Shout out to Kevin in the back.
Kevin and Simon the Neophytes, who are household names already. They're offering some very important analysis of the game at the beginning and the end.
Very important.
Very important. Great. Okay. So that's I mean, we're going to keep that coming, and as I say, we've got a whole bunch of the team now chipping in with content to sort of get things rolling again, and we're really excited to hear Davey's faction expertise every week with Bug Watch. He's been playing Tyrannid sort of inside out for months and months and months, and I think he's really well positioned to offer that kind of insight to you guys. But one other exciting bit of news that we have is that we are now going to be partnering and affiliating with the Goonhammer Media Network, which means that there'll be a little bit of cross promotion with the wonderful team at Goonhammer, and that you'll be able to sort of find links to our podcasts and content on the Goonhammer site as well. So that's obviously a really exciting thing for us. We all love Goonhammer. We all read it avidly. We know the writers pretty well. Some of us have played against them. Liam killed a bunch of Chris's guys with a shot prow one time. Best moment ever. Absolutely brilliant. Shot prows for life. So really, really chuffed to be working with Goonhammer, and obviously I've been writing for them recently, and they're a really good bunch, and it's a lot of fun to be involved. So thank you, Goonhammer, for taking us on. Fantastic. Right, that is all the self-promoting that we have to do, but now it's Jon's turn. Jon, show the world. Who are you? What are you about? Who is Scrivo? The enigmatic Scrivo.
that is a great question. I guess I'm Scrivo. I am a local gamer to Tom. I was probably one of the first people he played when he got back into the hobby, other than his partner.
Pretty much my enabler. It was the only reason I got back in at all was with your help.
I sold him to some questionable kits that were really good for intro people, but not for the kind of person that Tom became. I run a toy shop local to Tom and I.
Yeah.
I'm part of the local committee of my local Wargames club as well, so I've got kind of the social element of wargaming is kind of a thing for me. I got back into the hobby 7-8 years ago. Me and my schoolmates all did that thing of like, we're all getting a bit tired now. We can't go out to the pub too late. And we're all sort of WhatsApping going, what are you guys doing at the moment? And literally we're all just like, guys, I got to tell you this. I just dug out some Warhammer out of my garage and started painting them. And then we all four of us were doing it exactly at the same time. It was very unnerving. It was just like, it was almost like we knew. It was almost like the star child of Warhammer was telling us that we needed to do this. It was quite bizarre. And then me being me, I didn't really kind of sit too still with the hobby, and I kind of got so into it. And then about 5 years ago, I started doing some artwork for Rob on the Honest Wargamer. Then next thing you know, I was helping him doing live streams of events across the world.
Yeah.
Did some of the shows as well, quite a lot during lockdown. And then I ended up helping out on the 40k show in the last year or so, but we're on a slight hiatus until 10th now. So, but that's been my journey.
You're an absolutely vital cog on this wargame, right? With all of the design, and the graphics, and the display when you go typos, making sure things get done. And so yeah, I mean, obviously we're all massive on Wargamer fans here. And it's fair to say that you guys basically, I think, sort of force people into AOS just through sheer enthusiasm. It's hard not to listen to those shows, but I kind of want in on this just because they sound like they're having a lot of fun. It just sounds like a laugh. It sounds like a good time. And yeah, I mean, obviously you're literally our community leader at Tring War Games, and the shop's a funny one because I just have a couple of really fond memories of when I lived down the road. And I think one of my first Warhammer memories getting back into it was going to your shop to buy the Spoilpox Scrivener for Nurgle Demons, and just being so chuffed with this horrible little Nurgle Demon. Because I think Nurgle Demons were the first army. I did some Death Guard, but Nurgle Demons were like the first army I properly fell in love with. And I was just getting them like one bit at a time from your shop, and it was just a great time. Sadly, they're garbage right now. Unfortunately,
in both games,
in both systems. Oh no, I didn't even. I was hoping they might be alright in AOS as and when I have a look, but that's a real shame. And so obviously, you've got a lot of different things on the go, but this new sort of Warzone Faustus series was your first attempt at running kind of an event series of your own, right?
Yeah.
And you had a very specific vision for it. You wanted to do something a bit different. Do you want to explain to people what that was? Yeah.
So the local sort of Tring community up until probably about 2 years ago, it was very much people that wanted to just play, pick up games. It was all very kind of, here's what I own, here's what I want to play with. I haven't played for months at a time, but I'm coming back and want to play. So it was all very casual, very thematic. Yeah. And that was nice. It was very soft. I then kind of did the inevitable thing of kind of sneaking into tournaments and getting more and more kind of like, well, I've got to take this because otherwise I'm going to get shot off the table.
I kind of wanted to see where I could
kind of find in the middle, because with the kind of the introduction of Crusade into 9th edition, it was kind of like, cool, we can play story mode, but we can still be kind of using our big boy toys, not having to just bring a Land Raider every time. But it didn't quite scratch the itch. So it's kind of trying to find that healthy medium of kind of like, you can run an event. It doesn't have to be aggressive, cutting-edge lists, but it can still have some teeth to it, but also tell a story. And that was kind of the goal, was kind of, can I tell a story? People have a cool tournament and are competitive, but not at the cost of everyone else's enjoyment. And I think mostly we got it.
I think absolutely, and I think crucially it drew together all those crowds, which as you say, you're kind of in all those orbits, right? You compete, but you also have more thematic and narrative sort of ambitions, and you enjoy that stuff as well. I remember you and I used to do narrative and Crusade stuff all the time, like Crimson Fists and Orcs and all that. Heavily unfair on you with hindsight. I didn't fully appreciate this at the time because I was still.
That was the old Orc book. That was horrendous.
Crimson Fists just gunning down all these Orcs we were playing, but yeah, I mean, because that's the thing. I think the crowd and the attendees at these events, it's been all sorts, hasn't it? We've got some very some tournament players, but we've also got some very, very sort of relaxed and casual and thematic players, and it's managed to incorporate all those interests.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell the people a little bit about the sort of the story you cooked up and how that links up to the events themselves?
Yeah. So when we were doing kind of local Crusade stuff, we had this Delphon Expanse subsector. Yes. So what I did is I grabbed that map and went, I'll pick a few planets from there, see what I can kind of thread story-wise with this. And then the goal here was each of the kind of greater factions. So I did the whole Age of Sigmar thing and went, right, if I can have everyone in 4 factions,
what would they be?
Makes it easier to kind of give some sort of semblance of structure. So we had Chaos as a kind of, I called them alliances because Grand Alliances as a structure kind of works. Then Imperium. And then I split the Xenos up into 2 halves. I did Raiders, which were all the kind of the bit more spiky, aggressive end of the spectrum, including and then we had Necrons, Tau, and Eldar as civilization. So it was that kind of like they fit. There could have been kind of toes in both sides, but it just felt like a kind of a sensible fit to it. And then what I planned was then that as each round of the tournament had results come in, if those 4 players won overall, if you put all their points together, their story thread went up a notch.
Right. Yeah,
and then it was essentially like it was this weird little kind of flow chart of like whoever wins each round changed it, little thread of information. The first one that we did, I literally gave out little threads of paper for people to read.
Yes, you did. It was
at
amazing.
the time it was fun, but at the same time it was like I was handing out notes at school, and it just felt a little bit kind of.
I really liked it. I liked the little notes.
And then they started asking me to read them out. And then the next, for the second one, I did actual prepped graphics, so that basically at the beginning of each round, I posted up, here's the results from the last round. Boom, a picture went up in the thread for everyone to see. So it was kind of like the story progressed. Then as a result, any kind of threat. So in the first event, it was very much structured around, there was a few planets. Chaos were really having a really strong footing in the story, where they were kind of circling around this planet called Faustus, which was an old crone world, Faustus 3 specifically, a crone world. So it's an old Eldar sort of style planet that the Imperium had kind of repopulated and basically misusing, but Chaos kind of had plans for it. And it turns out those plans were quite nefarious, and it spawned a demon world at the end of the first event because Chaos really overwhelmed the subsector, and it went boom and got reborn as a place called Sycorax. So
that was the finale, right?
Yes. So this weekend's previous event was actually called Sycorax Rising, to kind of show that the threat was there. It was kind of meant to be like the part 2 of a trilogy, to kind of go, we can fix this. It's not totally broken, and let's see what happens. For it, I felt like there was the good story threads to it, but it still felt like it was 4 players playing separately. So for this one, I went, right, we're playing team format, and threw that into the mix just to see if that could help kind of bring people together. And although I think in the first one, the Chaos team felt very structured and like they really wanted to tell a story and had plans for how to kind of build 4 very different lists, the other groups, because they were people that didn't know each other, didn't really interact until the day.
Yeah, for sure.
And so having some little WhatsApp chats for them to plan their lists and do the team format sign kind of pairings was quite fun.
It was really
it kind
fun.
of it snuck in a bit of the kind of the planning, kind of competitive nature, but also
camaraderie as well, right?
Everyone kind of going, "Oh, I think your list might be a bit tough," or "I think the list might struggle a bit." And it was kind of nice that kind of there was some kind of group policing of each other as well, which was nice. It kind of it then kind of as the story kind of progressed, to kind of spoil it a little bit, Chaos did win, but it was a lot closer this time.
This was really, really right down to the end, wasn't it?
I think it came, let me just get my points here. It was a difference of 18 points. So I did it based on literally every team could score up to 80 points in a round, and there was just 18 points between them, which that's very close. When the first one, I think it was, when we did it out of 100 for each player,
it was
close. No, ran away with it. So it was all quite close.
We broke Team Chaos up this time. We realised that we'd slightly misjudged it, so it wasn't quite the same as last time. But Imperium were really strong this time.
Very close.
A few extra
2 guard players. Who knew?
A couple of guard players who put some numbers up for their team, and that made it much more spicy. And so I guess I'm curious now. You've had a couple of days to debrief on it. I'm wondering how you feel about the structure as it was this time, and what you're thinking you're going to do next. Because obviously, as you say, this is part 2 of 3. You're looking to the future. What did you like? What would you change going forwards, do you think?
So I think I'd want to try to do it so that ideally, in an ideal world, I'd like to do bigger. But I think doing the third one at the same size would be the sensible route. But very much, I want to try to get it done very similar sort of format, maybe not with the teams, purely because that does slow down a round. And when you're playing 3 games of Warhammer in a day,
pairings is admin, right? Yeah. Especially when people aren't familiar with it.
Oh, completely. So to kind of strip that out a little bit, work out a system, because I've been chatting with a few people on kind of ways of doing it so that you then still pair into other factions, but then it's done at your skill level, so through kind of Swiss type thing, which I think would help, because then it doesn't create these situations where someone is thrown under the bus every game.
And we definitely found that the whole pairing system felt a bit unneeded, because we didn't game it. We weren't like, oh, let's absolutely screw over X, Y, Z. But there was absolutely the scope for that. and it also meant that, as you say, in terms of actual matching, you could be on however many losses across the event and then still end up getting matched into someone really good or something really strong.
Which can be quite tough. And normally you kind of float to your level in a kind of a traditional GT, so you tend to avoid that in the last 2 games, perhaps. But
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so for the next one, probably looking more at how I can structure it differently to push forward the story. So, for example, Slanesh specifically has been very successful.
Yeah, several times now.
They're going to be split off into their own group, potentially, is the plan, to kind of show that not necessarily the gods are all happy at each other, because that's part of the charm of Chaos to me, is that they shouldn't be this big unified force, that they are squabbling brothers, basically,
it's what
or
they
siblings.
Always do just when they're nearly home, right? They break up amongst themselves. That sounds great.
Yeah, and that, just to me, that sounds exciting, because like, if the story's looking a foregone conclusion, there's nothing worse than a brother that's been scorned. It's very Shakespearean, and that's kind of my jam.
I like it a lot. Yeah, so I'm hopefully Slanesh coalition next time versus others. Yeah. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, and I'm hopefully going to try to do it before too late in the summer, but I just need to find a good date for it, really, which is the challenge as well, because there's so many events now.
Yeah, of course, it's tricky. It is tricky, and when you've got sort of a constituency, right? You've had a lot of the same players over the 2 events. You're kind of feeling, well, I want to make sure as many of those as can come, and it's finding dates to do that. And I mean, I think we've built a really nice sort of like event culture around it, which is really fun. We had the socials, and we had everyone nattering away in the WhatsApp and stuff beforehand, and that was really, really fun. So yeah, I think it's good to try and maintain that. But as you say, it's also hopefully a template that you can adapt and take forward and maybe go even bigger, right? Which is very exciting. Yeah,
I think it'd be nice to, especially doing it more local to home, because I'm obviously down in the south of England. Not having to drive 2 hours north just to put on an event would be quite nice.
Yeah.
If it could be, I can go home at the night. Great.
Yeah. And how did you find sort of TOing as an experience?
I don't find it too bad, really. I think it's always those weird little fringe interactions that there isn't often an answer for that get asked. Generally, I've been quite lucky that there wasn't any of these "how do you rule this" kind of people trying to squeeze me out. It was all completely.
It just wasn't that kind of event.
Here's a weird interaction. How would you rule it? And it's just like, a good example is one of the cards didn't say you score this at the end of the game if you've started it in your last turn, but some of the other cards do.
Right.
At first I was like, oh, well, maybe it should be. And then I kind of thought about it. I was like, but no, other cards state.
Yeah.
They complete as well. So it was just like, it felt fair, but at the same time, it's always a bit tough when you're TOing those sorts of things, because you can see both sides and you're just like, well,
of course.
Don't want to always just put it down to a dice roll either, because that feels hollow.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, as you say. I think you had a nice bunch there, and I think you provided a really nice sort of sense of occasion and momentum with it, and sort of talking between the rounds and all that stuff. I think it felt very, very well handled. And we had obviously nice little updates coming, and we all got a little Inquisitor model as well. There was a sort of titular Inquisitor character in the Warzone. So we all got a little model to take away. There's lots of some custom dice. We were very well taken care of. It was all very, very nicely done. Really nice eye for detail. What do you make of sort of Tempest cards? That was another curiosity I had for you, because obviously we've used Tempest cards both times. How do you feel that went as a sort of as an event format?
I think they're fun and they're fine, but they can be really frustrating. I think if you can be really unlucky in a couple of your games, it can really tar your kind of opinion of them. But I think if you've played them enough beforehand, you can kind of almost build your list around what it can achieve from the cards. Yeah. So like in 8th edition and 7th edition 40k, where you had Maelstrom cards, you built a list to do stuff in those missions. So it's exactly the same in my mind.
Completely.
And knowing which cards are in there means that if you've, say, done one that you go, oh, I've done that one, I know that this, say, behind enemy lines equivalent is in there still to come. You then maybe position your units differently, knowing that that's coming up, to make it nice and easy for yourself. So I think some of it is it's because it's a different style of play and you have to be a bit more on your feet.
Yeah.
It's not, I've got the same 3 for the whole game.
Completely. It's very reactive, isn't it? It's a bit more like Sigma, where you've got kind of in-game, your in-game objectives are changing rather than here is my sort of schematic I'm going to just do,
But I think that in itself is a sub-game that if it's for you, great. If not, I don't begrudge people don't, but I think it's cool that it's another way of playing, and I do kind of miss the old Maelstrom in that respect because it did give you a different thing.
Yeah. I say, our local club, as you say, is quite casual and relaxed, and we used to play that all the time, and it was great.
Yeah.
It was very nice to pick up games with people in the local area, and I think I really enjoyed Tempest this weekend. I thought it's fun. You get closer games actually as well. A lot of results much closer. You get these amazing high scoring draws as well. You can get all sorts of like ridiculous outcomes. And as you say, it's like I imagine if you actually sat down and looked through all the cards properly and were like, right, I need something to do each of these, and you properly build your listing to do that, then I'm sure you could. But it felt like I had quite a thematic but still pretty spiky Drakari list. I still felt like I could do things when I needed to do things.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's a lot of the same tools that you'd use in current 40k anyway. So mobility, infantry, and that flexibility and that positional stuff, which isn't anything particularly out of the ordinary. So you should have the toys for it, really. So
yeah, very much so. Obviously, that was great, and I say thanks again for hosting the event. I mean, where will people be able to follow you for information about what's coming up? Obviously, this is all very much you're still cooking up the next one and when it's going to happen. But where can people get information about your future events and plans?
So probably on my Twitter at the moment, which is Scrivo Art, is my name on that. So there we go. That'd be the place to look. I tend to put up a lot of tweets and nonsense a lot of the time, but generally, if I'm doing something like that, I'll be promoting it quite hard. So brilliant,
yeah. And obviously, you do a lot of artwork as well. You've done artwork for both me and Chris. We've got avatars, 40k avatars that you drew us. So there's other stuff on there.
Very flattering, hopefully.
I've got an extra limb in mine. I'm not sure how flattering that is. It's pretty grim.
Well, we've shared a room. That's all I'm saying.
I will very, very, very briefly rattle through the matches that I had, and then we'll move on to our next segment. So I was on Team Raiders this time, so it was Drakari. We had 2 Orc players. We had Honest Wargamer Rob on Speedwar, Aaron of 6++ as well on sort of Kill Rig Pressure Orcs, and John Phipps on Gene Stealer Cults. And I think we lost to Chaos and to Imperium, and we won against Civilization. And then I think the Coalition, we had a round where like Raiders and Chaos teamed up, and I think we won that round. So we were sort of middling across the event, and we had a lot of fun with it. And I had some great games. I had a draw in WTC scoring, but it's a win really, Joe. Don't worry. against the Custodes, I think he won that 95-90. Really, really fun game. Big punch up in the middle. And I played Chris's Shadow Keepers before this event, and Joe was Empress Chosen. I was like, oh, thank goodness. And then he ran his bikes in and turned them into Shadow Keepers. Like, you bastard! You know they're really annoying for Drakari. It takes one attack off all my guys. And they're like, oh, I can't hurt them. It's so annoying. So he's a very, very smart player, Joe, and I really enjoyed that game. I had a narrow defeat to our own Lee Churchwood's Emperor's Children, and he had this wonderfully sort of malicious, nasty, sneaky list where he had a Noctilith Crown and Dark Commune. So he had a bunch of the sort of chaos stuff you don't see sort of around the kind of cultist possessed theme. But the Noctilith Crown in Tempest was surprisingly good because you can sort of cluster objectives because it's placed objectives, and then you bung this crown down and it's giving a little invuln aura to all your chaos stuff. So it was actually quite clever. It helped him out against the range shooting. And we just had a massive punch up in the end. We stood off each other for ages, and then basically some possessed came in, big broke of 10 possessed, and then I just charged it with everyone. And it was very, very violent. But Lee took it on the cards. I think he scored better across the game than me. And then we had, what else did we have? What else did I actually play? Oh, Eldar. Loads of Eldar. I played Bealtan.
Yes.
And Paul's lovely Aspect Warriors Bealtan army, incredibly thematic, and he had Karandras leading it. And I basically decided I wasn't going to take Drazar in my Drakari list. I had like sort of everything in boats with a Tantalus and Raiders and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, I won't take Drazar because my fluff for it was, it's like a sort of one-way mission to destroy a webway gate before the demons find it and get into the webway and find Kimura. And these guys have all been basically doomed to die by Vect, and he's sent them off. He's like, if you can shut this webway gate off, then you can come back. But he knows they're not going to make it back. And so I was like, Drazar wouldn't come on that mission. But then this guy, Paul, in the chat in the run-up to the event was like, oh, I'm taking Karandras. You've got to bring Drazar so we can have a little duel. I was like, all right, fine, I'll take Drazar. Yeah, I don't need convincing to run Drazar.
You're like, okay, he's already packed.
Yeah. So we had this really fun cinematic game where I think Paul sort of had me on the back foot for 2 turns, loads of shooting, and then I gradually managed to get round him and sneak in and shut his stuff down. But in the middle of the battlefield, Karandras was just running around doing Karandras things in the centre. I sent my succubus in to take 3 wounds off him to soften him up. He killed the succubus, and then in turn 4, Drazar pops out and comes for him because now he's weak enough to kill. But if he'd got up on a 4-up, he would still have been ready and waiting to sort of finish Drazar off. But sadly, he didn't make his 4-up, so he stayed dead, stayed down. So, but then the striking scorpions killed Drazar anyway. So it was all in all, it was absolutely brilliant. And then I played Gareth's Eandon Wraith Host. That was a really fun game. Loads of Wraith blades with axes and shields running around. Just will not die, that list. It's incredibly tough and chewy. But I got good cards on that one and was able to win on the cards. And then final game, Alex, Chancellor of Twisted Dice, with his big Bane Blade. Great big Bane Blade tank.
Did it kill the Tantalus?
I'll tell you what happened to the Tantalus. The Tantalus came in from Deep Strike, shot some stuff. He fired the Bane Blade at it, did 3 hits with his Strength 14 gun, rolled triple 1s to wound it.
Amazing.
Completely bounced, and then in my next turn, I killed a Lehman Russ, which shot on death and just one-shot the Tantalus before the Tantalus had even got to fire. So I was just like, oh no, absolute disaster. I just started getting a foothold in the game, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm actually going to somehow do this, and then boom, it was gone, and that was the end of it. And again, it was one of those ones where I was able to stay in the game by hiding, but obviously with the cards, if you're sort of playing a very cagey hiding game, it's much harder to go out and do all the things you need to do. And I just didn't quite get the rub of the green to get that. So Alex won that 185. I think it was a really good game. And Alex finished third-ish?
Second at the end, I think.
Yeah, really good showing. Yeah, so it's super fun. All the games were really enjoyable. I really enjoyed taking a more sort of themed, sort of flotilla type list. Fragile as hell, but it does look lovely. And thanks to all my opponents, and thanks obviously to you, John, and everyone else who helped out with setting it up, and Rob for hosting us. It was really, really good time. And Rob, bless him, was on Speedwire all weekend, and obviously hasn't played a ton of 40k. So thanks, Rob, for being a hero and stepping in at the last minute to fill that last team space. Right, I think we should do some listener questions, and that should probably get us home for today. So, Chris, do you have any questions from any other sources outside of Discord whilst I check the Discord?
I have a question from our very own Mr. Lee Jones.
Oh, exciting.
So, he says, the player who goes second typically has an advantage at late game primary scoring. As we look forward or look towards 10th edition, how would you like to see GW address this?
Mm-hmm. Anyone want to go on this one?
Well, we discussed this slightly off camera.
Yeah, we did.
And we were saying that actually at the moment, I think statistically the second win percentage isn't actually that skewed anymore.
Yeah.
It is certainly around the very low 50s kind of mark. And I think particular missions, it's been really bad. You know, we always talk about abandoned sanctuaries.
Yes.
Which
has changed, right? They've taken that extra 5 points out of the pack. Yeah.
In the film, it was like a 17-point swing kind of thing, which is huge, and they have changed that, and they've just used some common sense, and now that's kind of gone. And I think if you think the fact that you go first means you can set up your positioning, you can set out your screens, you can potentially cause a decent amount of damage. Some armies can obviously cause a lot of damage, but that varies depending on your force and what it's capable of. So you want the fact that the player going second is probably going to be playing with less than 2,000 points. You've got to try and equate that and level that up to a number of victory points. And I think with most of the missions now, it's probably, as long as you've got stuff alive at the end, it's probably going to be around 4 points. isn't it?
Mm.
Because you're just going to get your hold more.
Yeah.
So I think what I like is just them to think about their missions a bit more and
Yeah.
not have such ridiculous swings at the end of a mission.
Yeah.
You need a little nudge, and the hold more, those 4 victory points, that's enough, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think the two most egregious defenders, Abandoned Sanctuaries was one, and the other was Tide of Conviction, right, which is a massive swing because of the scoring 2 for each of their home field plus 4 for the back one. So again, there's like 8 points on the line on the mission specific. I actually haven't checked to see if that's changed in Arcs of Omen, because the fact that Abandoned Sanctuaries I hadn't clocked that at all.
Yeah,
so I need to now read them all and be like, oh, does it actually do what it used to do? Because I'd assumed that it was the same, and it's actually not. But yeah, there definitely are a couple of egregious defenders. I think I like that the player on bottom of turn can get a few more points. I think that's healthy. I think that balances the game okay. It's just avoiding it being able to completely overturn a healthy deficit. And we were discussing as well, like, it is nice. I think it is good that the first turn roll off is significant enough that certainly when I go into it and I get a first or second, I'm thinking I have to play this slightly differently now. I think that's interesting. I think that's better for the game than a situation where it doesn't really matter. You're going to do exactly the same thing either way. And I guess we'll have to see. It'll be really interesting to see if things like primary and secondary stay the way they are, full stop. Right? Are we going to keep that sort of ITC style system? Who knows? It's completely up in the air at the moment. But I guess it'll be interesting to see some data from these new builds in Arcs of Omen that are obviously quite a lot of things building to try and knock the enemy out nice and early again now. Be interesting to see how the first turn, second turn win rates hold up. Certainly that narrative, the 1K event you and I were at, John, they did a really detailed stats breakdown, right? And it was go first win rate was like 46, 47%, which, I was there with Flesh Terrors feeling like going first was really, really good. but obviously it wasn't the same for everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that one, Lee. So, this is a fun one from Gail Maris on the Discord. Thank you, Gail Maris. I'll put this to both of you guys. What's one unit from your respective armies that you think has play, but that no one has jumped on yet?
Well, my army doesn't have many data sheets.
Harlequins. Yeah, that's a bit tricky, isn't it?
I have gone to town on literally every data sheet there. I think early doors, no one rated bikes. No one was really using bikes, and the 8 boat list, the 9 boat lists were like the go-to. But I was always like, two bikes for that turn 1 deadly performance.
Yeah.
And do you know what everyone's running now? 2 bikes.
Exactly that. Yeah.
So now it's not a special thing, but that was quite nice.
No, definitely.
Other than that, there's not really. Everyone's tried everything in the Harlequin book.
That's the issue with Harlequins, isn't it?
Talking about other armies, the Custodes, probably my other army, a unit which people should know about. Venatari. I want to say Venatari.
Yeah, Venatari.
They have obsec and they move.
Yeah.
Their shooting's crap, but they have obsec and they move 12 inches. And having just played with Custodes, they're really slow compared to Harlequins and don't get to do lots of fun things. But actually, the fact they have fly means they have access to a stratagem for fall back and shoot. And just like those extra little things. So for Custodes, see if we can get some Venatari in there, because I think that you'll find them quite handy.
Very nice. How about you, John?
For orcs, I would say flash kits.
Okay, nice, very nice.
Just the problem I had with them before was Armor Contempt made their guns feel slightly less punchy.
Right. Yeah.
But now, put them in some sort of a vehicle that doesn't give them a penalty to shoot, and you're off to a winner, I think.
Very, very nice.
And that's
I don't even know what they do.
So they're hitting on 4s for orcs, apart from the boss, which I think hits
also
on 3.
Accurate orcs. That's nice. Yeah. That's very nice.
The guns, I can't remember the profile, but they are high strength, bit of AP, and multi-damage. I think it's 2 damage.
Yeah, okay.
So for orcs, it's something quite unusual.
Yeah,
and then they've got a stratagem they can fire twice.
Yeah,
if you're shooting at the target is the closest visible unit for you as well. So
that's
there's
cool.
some play to it. And then obviously if you're playing them as freebooters, if you kill a unit, they're hitting on +1.
Yes. Good Space Marine.
Basically green Space Marines. Okay, that does sound like there's some play in there. That's interesting.
But they might still be a bit too expensive. But I want them to work. So I believe.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do, right?
Anything for your Dark Angels that you can think of?
That's the weird one. That's such an explored book now.
No one's talking about that.
No, literally, if I have one more person tell me, have you got any Deathwing Command Squads, and I'll slap them because it's like I was using them from the beginning of the edition.
Yeah, you were. You were also running. You were running like sort of Alpha Strike Ravenwing from like the moment
I got a wooden spoon.
Yeah, it didn't always go great.
Yeah,
but it was amazing on the table though. So yeah, you've been trying all these different things before they got the shot in the arm. So hopefully it'll work even better now.
I'd say in an inverse to the question, don't try taking the Dark Talon. It's still not any better, even if it comes on from reserves. It's just not worth it. Still,
yeah, that's fair.
It's sad.
I think for Gene Stealer cults, I think two things. I actually think Aberrants are quite decent now as heavy hitters and as something that can take a punch and stick around. I've only really experimented with them in more sort of casual games. But every game I've actually used them, I've felt like they do their job. They take out a big target. They hold ground more effectively than almost anything else that you'd have. And they work really well if you run the Biophagus to give them Feel No Pain and buffs of that kind. So, yeah, Aberrant's definitely worth running at 27 points, and you can have a lot of fun with that. And also the Reductus Saboteur, the little bomb lady. I'm currently painting her because I quite like... She's 70 points now. And she's got a nice anti-vehicle weapon, which is nice to have if there's more tanks and stuff around. You can give her a relic so she gets crossfire, and she can be another unit she hits on 2, so it's another way to get a crossfire token on something for your neophytes to shoot. And she can't be targeted if she's in area terrain and she's more than 12 inches away. So she's quite a nice sneaky way of hanging on to an objective you've been shot off, just by a dint of, actually, your opponent can't actually pick her up. Mortars, tanks, whatever else they have. If they want to get her, they have to come close, and we like it in Gene Stealer Cult when they come close. So yeah, those two would be my tips at the moment. Next question. Paint Celestine asks, with the new meta shaping up to be a shooting-focused one, how badly does this affect Imperial Knights? Anyone got any strong opinions on that?
Well... I'm just going to steal what David Gaylord and Vic VJ were saying on their latest Fireplace.
That's not far off, is it?
Yeah, which is that Knights now have more of a place because of their AP, which is -1 and -2, and that's good into Marines. And obviously Marines have lost their Armour of Contempt. So in terms of their output, they're actually a lot more killy now. Obviously, the issue is that everyone's kind of expecting vehicles and going to be plugging a lot of melter, and with these small trade units, these eradicators that come on the battlefield from an edge and just go boom, double firing. There's a smouldering crater of a knight there. I think that's gonna cause issues for them, but that's because we're all assuming that's the way the meta's going to go. We don't know that for certain, do we? But I imagine things like Raven Wing, which can whiz around, shoot you, and move block you as well. All those sorts of things. I think
23-inch turn one move.
Knights would be the same. They always are. I'd imagine they're a gatekeeper army that on the right table,
that's kind of
mid-table bully, but they're not going to win any events. I'd imagine.
I just think they're going to lose one of those shooting duels, aren't they, before they get all the way through an event? Like, it's just going to happen. There's just a few
I imagine will blow them up.
Like Votan, and obviously Votan aren't in a great place, but Votan still turn up and just blow Knights straight off the board.
20-minute game.
Yeah, so that's
and if you're avoiding the big Knights because you don't want to just be shot at, you're bringing all the little Knights, which then splits the problem but doesn't actually fix it, because you can hide them, but then they're just smaller targets that get picked off, and then like Codex Warfare loves that.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's
making it worse,
isn't it? Yeah. So I don't know. I'd be interesting to see if you reserve like 4 or 5 armages and hide the rest, is there some sort of spring the counter attack kind of play? But it just It doesn't feel as fun or as worthwhile as just running one of the other shooter armies right now, does it? Really, like it kind of. You've always been a Dark Angels main, John. You're fine.
It's fine. When the other 5 land speeders turn up, you can have a go.
Oh yes, yeah. He showed me his order at the week. I was like, oh my word, what have you done? What have you done? You got some... No, it's fine. It's good. It's good to get carried away with it. The follow-up question from Elmo Miniatures was, why is Double Valiant OP?
Only in the hands of Lewis.
Only
Lewis
in
is
the hands
the
of
only
Lewis,
player
yes.
that I've ever known to run Double Valiant, and he always does really well at tournaments.
Seasoned Knights players like Lewis and like Jay of Mohawk Miniatures can just get it done. Doesn't matter what you give them, they'll just get it done.
2 massive Valiants. Harpoon, Flamer. Can't charge it.
We have another question from our very own Captain Caveman. I believe that's Paul James.
No.
Yep.
He says, this is actually a very interesting one to have with John on the show. So, what changes to the core rule set would you like to see implemented into 10th edition? And would you prefer a full rules rework like 7th to 8th, or tweaking but keep the same fundamentals like 8th through 9th? It's a big old can of worms, isn't it?
Well, that's I think based on the fact that Paul today on our WhatsApp sent us a bunch of rumours of what 10th edition entails. Stitch us up, I suspect. Basically, the rumours were based around the fact that it's going to become a bit more like Sigmar in various ways. Kind of like one of the things was like a combination of the command phase and psychic phase, for example. A general more of a simplification of the game.
That doesn't sound like a complete reconfiguring, though. More like a sort of streamlining.
Enough change that you need an index, though. I think that's the thing, isn't it? I guess it's the rules still similar enough, like the jump from 8th to 9th, where you can keep your codices, or does everyone need a brand new book because enough has changed? And I guess those are the 2 changes. I dislike the fact that in 9th they made the game simpler. I think they took away some of especially the combat phase and charge phase, like jank you could do. I think they just took away player choices, and the more choices you take away from players, the more of a reduction of skill level there is. I didn't like what they did there. Got used to it now. So I would not like the game to get simpler, and it sounds like they are trying to simplify it a bit. So I would rather just tweaks, because I think they've got a pretty reasonable system at the moment. But yeah.
What do you think, John?
Well, I think when they do tweak things, it's often they tweak it in the wrong way. Like they'll tweak it to oversimplify it. When in fact, what they should do is, if something's bloated, you bring it down into a reasonable, understandable level, or you make something more efficient. Like at the beginning of 9th edition, they went, right, we're getting rid of all the rerolls. By the end of the edition, we've got people with full rerolls on a unit again. And it's smattered across an army, not just one unit. And it's those things that slow the game down that I think that I would personally, if they were going to do one big change, would be kind of cleaning up all those sorts of details again, or alternating activations.
Oh, that's spicy. That would be a big change.
It's something I really do appreciate.
They're not going to do it. It's just too many units, isn't it?
It's so big, isn't it?
It's such a change.
But I do think less rerolls. Having played a handful of games of Sigmar, and Kill Team even, I'm struck by how few rerolls there are in those. And you're sort of like, well, what happens is what happens. And Sigmar especially, it's like, if you whiff, end up. And sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't, and it's not the end of the world. You actually get used to it. You're like, bad roll. They happen, right? I think in 40k there's so many ways to just completely flatten out and control variance in 9th that people are just used to having exactly what they want whenever they want it, and that's not necessarily a good thing for a dice game. So I think I'd agree with you on that. I think it's sort of, me and John talk about this all the time. It's sort of cyclical, isn't it? Like 8th was very back to basics. 9th, it did simplify some things, but it layered on a hell of a lot in terms of like extra faction rules and mechanics and layers. which players like me who are very obsessive and like to just know every little bit really like. But then, as I say, more casual pickup players really struggle to keep all of those different moving parts in their heads, and it gets quite difficult for games. So what I definitely feel for balance is that you're not going to reach balance by just completely starting again.
No.
Because with the stuff that's already been, you at least have data to know what worked, what didn't, what was too much, what wasn't. And if you're at least, I mean, again, you're seeing this in Sigmar at the moment with the next wave of books, where sometimes the book's very much the same sort of stuff as it was last time, or a little bit of a toning down or whatever else. And sometimes it's a massive change because the faction needed a massive change, but it's working with what was there before, right? And that makes more sense to me than just completely restarting. But yeah, I actually think indexes would be fun because it would be nice to all be on the same sort of footing at the start of an edition, right? And then have the books come and the inevitable chase that comes with them. We have one final question. It's another from Galmaris, and this is: what are the top 3 things you are building your list to handle in arcs?
Secondary play.
Okay.
So it's all about the secondary play. So from my perspective with the Harlequins, my army dies a lot quicker now, so I need to make sure I can be scoring consistently well. I know, Tom, it's devastating.
F in the chat for Harlequins.
Yeah.
Shame.
So behind enemy lines is obviously the main one. So
yeah,
mission play, so secondary play. I think it depends on your army, doesn't it? Really.
Yeah.
But I think everyone has to be aware of what their game plan is going to be now. Like, are you going to try and be that army that blows people off the board, or are you going to be the army that hides and scores your points whilst dying slowly? Those are like the two. Table or be tabled, what are you going to go for? And you need to embrace it.
Yeah.
I guess.
How about you, John?
Very much echoes that, actually, because if I'm trying to do Raven Wing, I keep doing the thing where I go, I'm going to put a load of infiltrators, and then I start putting scouts in, and then I'm like, well, actually, that's 500 points of stuff that I don't need.
Yeah.
If I kill them, I don't need to be holding them back. They're sticky.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side with Orcs, I'm probably looking to put in more things like Storm Boys. Like at the moment, I normally put 2 units of Storm Boys, but if I have in a third, it gives me that flexibility. And when it's secondaries, you can score without. If you can't kill them, don't try to kill them. I learned this from watching Speedwall bounce off of 5 opponents. It's like you may as well just be scoring whilst you're on the table, right?
Yeah.
If you can do things that don't, like, good example is the change to psychic interrogation. Why would you take that? Because there's a risk they can stop you whilst, say, behind enemy lines. Yes, they can screen you, but once your models are there, they're there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Done.
Absolutely.
So any interaction avoidance there is what I'm up for, really.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I've sort of, I think the same for me. It's secondary game. The Arcs of Omen detachment means I can take with GSC just more troops. So I've always had a couple of Acolyte squads for R&D, and now I just have 3 because it's like, why not just literally have a squad drop down in every flipping quarter, you know, or go back up, come back down, and it's just like it's so hard for the opponent to stop, and it's like that's a better use of 45 spare points than just a buffing character or something like that. Likewise, I know I've talked about it already, but the reason I'm going to try the Reductus Saboteur out is she's just another unit that can realistically help to tee up ambush and scoring on ambush out of reserves and stuff like that. So it just sharpens up the game plan. I'm a bit spoilt with GSC because I was going to say I think the other couple of things you need to build for are, one, if you can being able to mitigate, you know, reserves coming in, drop pods, etc. So if I wasn't GSC and able to hide, I would have, you know, like mandrakes or something, or scorpions, something forward deploy. And then what was the other thing I was thinking of? I think it's gone. It's been a long day. I think it's just gone. It's no longer in my head. I'm sorry, but I will remember it at some point, Gilmore, don't you worry. Thank you very much, everybody, for your questions. Oh, there was one final one. It wasn't in Discord because Sean Catewell, bless him, messaged me directly, and he wanted to know what you guys do to stay focused on your game plan during a game?
Ooh.
Good question. Good question.
I think it's you go in and you know, like, so for me, it's constantly checking my phone for my secondaries,
Yeah.
and it's having that mental checklist. And when I get tired, I forget it, but the mental checklist of how am I scoring my secondaries this turn? Can I affect their primary this turn? And then how am I scoring my secondaries next turn? And how can they stop my primary? And like those sorts of things based around my current turn and the next turn. If I keep going through those and making sure I'm always aware of the score, I've said this before in the podcast. It blows my mind that people play the game and don't know what the score is. Like, how are you tracking what you're doing? I mean,
Yeah.
even the people that obviously a lot of people like to write it down on a board. I'm like, yeah, but you're then having to surely constantly recount the scores and that. Like by using the app, I've got it there. I can literally play out the game, and I'm trying to do that more and more.
Yeah.
Is just work out. So Lee and I had. So this is a case in point. Lee and I had a game on Sunday, where we got to turn 3, and I was Harlequins, he was Demons, and I was looking like I was nearly tabled, but I still had all my characters left, and he chose an Assassinate. So I was like, what does the score end up if I just put all my characters in this boat, hide it at the back of the board, and then put it into strategic reserve next turn so he can't kill it?
Yeah.
And I
Nice.
worked out that the highest he could score was 50, and I was already on 50. And just purely by doing the calculations and the maths, it meant therefore that I knew, right, just keep those characters alive and you'll have enough of a lead that you'll win by a small amount before you get fully tabled. And I think just following to answer Sean's question, is my game plan is just based around my scoring, and it's just constantly having that mental checklist of those things. How am I impacting my scoring and their scoring each turn? 'Cause that's what we're trying to achieve. Killing, I mean, it's killing is definitely not that important. It's about that's the tertiary kind of thing. So I guess it's different for other armies. Some other armies are going to be like, how do I win this game? I need to kill my opponent. But generally, it's the points win prizes. So that's how I kind of go about doing it.
Yeah. But I think that highlights one of the trickier bits of this, right? Which is that it's good to have a game plan and to stick to it, but actually you also need to adapt to what the game throws up, right? And if you're looking to win the game, the score and making sure you're on the right side of it is the fatal thing. And as you say, Chris, that's a really good example of you basically identifying that now you need to do some things which would look a bit odd in game terms, but are essential for the scoring, right? To completely protect and shut off one secondary. And you've been able to identify the moment to do that based on what the score is and how the game's going. I guess you can compare that to like the moment in the LVO where Harpster's Sangard just suddenly all fly out and start smashing everyone up, because it's like, this is the time, right? In terms of the scoring, if I go now, demech everything, that's game, that's Jenga. Yeah. How about you, John?
So very similar sort of thing, but I find that often I get in my own head when I'm playing a game in the moment where I'll go, right, everything needs to move because it can move. And I'm going to try to shoot with everything because it can shoot. And it's like, well, actually, these grots, if they come out 5 inches from this ruin, they're in the middle of nowhere. Yes, next turn they could get to the next ruin and do an objective, but they're probably going to be dead in reality because my opponent, if they're not stupid, will kill them. So it's kind of remembering just to stick to kind of like only plays that actually matter. As well, like don't move something and put something out to shoot with it just for the sake of it. It's better not to shoot, especially with orcs. Keep it hidden behind a building, and then I can charge with it next turn.
Yeah, so there's a very good example of this in our bat rep that will come out of me and Chris. If the sharp-eyed among you watch that bat rep, what the hell am I doing with those mandrakes? Is all I'm going to say. What on earth is that decision? And that is a great example of just not thinking the next step ahead and just trying to do something slightly ad hoc in the moment that is huge for my sort of in-game outcomes at that moment in the game. So it's one to observe. The other thing I would say, Sean, for staying on track, because as I say, I think we both, that you both stressed how important it is to be able to adapt and keep track of just the counterplay and the circumstances, and I think that's massively important. But the best time to work out what you're doing and what you're doing next is your opponent's turn. That's
Correct.
the other thing I would say. That is the vast majority of my opponent's turn. I'm thinking about what I need to do and how I'm going to respond. You're going through the motions, you make the saves, you do whatever counterplay you can do, but that is your best slab of time for getting back in. Okay, where am I going next? What's going to happen? And keeping that sort of next step ahead rolling. And that I think is really important to do, and to make sure you use that time for yourself. But also don't be afraid to take time in the game as well, and have a moment and just pause. When I play games, there's a sort of bit at the start of turn where I'm just sort of looking at it, and players are always like, "Oh, I've got you thinking." Blah blah. It's like, yeah, absolutely have, but I need to do this bit now, because if I just randomly start doing stuff, that's when I play worst by a long shot. I need to make sure I've thought about how all those bits are going to connect up, and then it's like, right, let's do all the stuff. But that great question, Sean. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Okay, that takes us to bang on an hour. Perfect. Thank you so much, Jon, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It was really, really fun to have you, and we're looking forward to some Age of Sigmar adventures with you and the others, which you guys will all be able to hear about next week. We've been the Pluse. Thank you very much for listening. Do check out Jon's Twitter, and I say that he's going to be running more narrative events in the future. Do check out all the wonderful kind of videos we've got coming out on the channel this week. I'm going to watch Bug Watch after this and see what Davey's got to say about Tyranids, and see what the future of that faction looks like at the moment as well. So I'm looking forward to that. We've been the Pluse. Good night. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.